For anybody who may have been absent or just wants a refresher on writing essays for IB history, this is just a brief walkthrough of the things that we go over in class. And so we're going to walk through the basic structure of the outline and an example of what that essay looks like when it's actually written out. So the basic elements, and again, this is for basic structure. For those of you who are already scoring well, I will encourage you to kind of start to go beyond this, but this is set up to ensure you're hitting everything on the rubric and in a position to score well. You need to start off with an introduction paragraph, and the purpose of the introduction is to set up the paper. So you should have a bit of context in there. It doesn't need to be a ton, but 2 or 3 sentences to kind of set up the situation would be great. Definitely 100% has to be a thesis, a direct response to the question being asked. What is your paper about? And then your reasons for the thesis. In other words, preview what the body paragraphs are going to be about. For the history essays, they really like to see the introduction set up the rest of the paper. When you guys go into the body paragraphs, structure here is pretty straightforward. First sentence should be a topic sentence. What is that body paragraph about? Followed up by evidence, which means indisputable facts. The more specific you can be, the better on this. So, try to avoid vague notions and use actual proper terms, names, places, etc., as a concrete evidence. And then explain what's the connection between the evidence and what the paragraph is about. And then repeat this process again. If you can do 3 pieces of evidence, even better, but at least 2 to really have a solid point made. And then you're going to go into another body paragraph, repeat the same steps, A through F, for the next body paragraph. And then we need to ensure we have a counter argument somewhere in here. You should be following the same steps. Simply throwing in like a sentence saying, acknowledging there's another viewpoint, but not going into actually evaluating that viewpoint isn't going to score you guys any points. So you should still be giving evidence explanation in terms of that alternate perspective. And for those of you who really want to push to score 6s and 7s, if you're seniors, this is at the point where we need to be starting to move beyond the 5-paragraph answer. If you can write a 6 or 7-paragraph essay, that demonstrates more content knowledge, more understanding of the material, and puts you in a better position to be able to get those high scores. So you might, want to put in another body paragraph in here before you reach your conclusion. Conclusion should summarize and be consistent. No new ideas in the conclusion, no questions. It should simply restate what you said. And the key here is consistency. If you've argued through the paper, one idea except for the counter argument, well, then your conclusion should be consistent with whatever that idea is, right? It should match what you've written. All right, so let's look at an example of what this structure looks like in practice. So we're going to take the essay prompt, discuss the role of economics in the start of the Mexican Revolution. And remember, when writing an essay response, you always need to consider what is it exactly they're asking for. So the focus of this should be the role of economics and how the Mexican Revolution starts. But remember, we need to have a counterpoint. You can't just discuss economics, so you need to be prepared to throw something else in there. So, first paragraph, introduction, context, thesis, reasons for the thesis. So let's see what we have in here. After achieving independence from Spain, Mexico entered decades of constant warfare. Invasions from other countries, internal wars, and the Texas Rebellion led to chaos and constant economic turmoil. As a result, people willingly allowed Porfirio Diaz to stay in power, as he at least brought stability and the possibility of economic growth. So this is our context. Not necessarily something answering the question, but it helps set up what is it we're going to talk about. We establish in this case why Diaz is even in power in the first place. However, Although there were economics improvements, most people did not see much benefit from his policies, which directly led to the Mexican Revolution. So, that is a very clear thesis statement. Discuss the role of economics in the start of the Mexican Revolution. Well, in this case, a lack of economic improvements directly lead to the revolution. That is a direct answer to that question. So here we have our thesis statement. And then the last thing we need here is our reasons for thesis: lack of pay for workers, poor conditions and pay for farmers, and a giant wealth. Sorry, that should be gap. I missed the word up. Tried to type this out within 45 minutes, so it kind of mimics what you guys are doing on the essays. Obviously, those are handwritten, but I didn't want to spend hours on this. That wouldn't be a fair example. So lack of pay for workers, poor conditions and pay for farmers, and a giant wealth gap all led towards the revolution, although other factors such as a lack of true democracy also played a role. So this tells me I'm going to have a paragraph about pay for workers, a paragraph about poor conditions and pay for farmers, a paragraph about the wealth gap, and a counter argument paragraph about issues concerning democracy. So we have our essay preview or our reasons for thesis, however we want to phrase that. Okay, so now our structure here should be topic sentence, evidence explain, concluding sentence. So let's just go in order of how I previewed the essay. Lack of pay for workers, the lack of fair pay for workers. And this is an easy way to set up your essay. If you have it here, just take those words and put them in the opening sentence. Mines and oil fields was a major cause of the revolution. So here we have a topic sentence. Everything in this paragraph needs to be about issues concerning fair pay for workers. After working in unsafe conditions for upwards of 80 hours per week, workers were taking home barely enough money to survive, often only being paid in company scrip. So this is an evidence sentence. What is our evidence? We have facts. They're working not only in unsafe conditions, but 80 hours a week, barely making any money, and also often being paid in company scrip, which isn't even real cash. They're being given credit at the company store. So these are facts. They're not something that can be debated one way or another. These are just the things that happened. So this is our evidence facts. We want to directly follow that up with a sentence connecting that to the idea of how does that lead to the revolution? The government's failure to address unfair pay and labor practices left the Mexican people searching for government leaders who would do so. So, how does this lead to the revolution? The government's not addressing the fair pay, so people are going to look for somebody else who will do it. So, we have our explanation of evidence. Repeat the pattern. Furthermore, foreign workers in Mexico, especially Americans, were often paid double the rate of Mexican workers for the same job. So again, this is a fact. Can't argue about how much money somebody was being paid. That's they're being paid a certain amount. It's double the rate of Mexican workers. This is again evidence or facts. Oh, what does that have to do with the revolt? This infuriated Mexican workers and left them feeling that President Diaz was catering to American businesses at the expense of the common people. So it's creating discontent among the Mexican workers, right? We're looking at what is the effect on them. So this is our explanation as to how that's going to lead people to revolting. And then our final sentence here is basically a paragraph summary. Paragraphs either end it in a summary or maybe a transition statement to the next paragraph. So in this case, we're going to summarize the working class's low income and the failure on the government to address it left them with no choice but to seek change. In this case, a revolution. So we have Um, that should all be evidence facts here. I don't know if I can expand that out. Okay. Let's just delete that and then make this all evidence and facts. So we follow that formula to a T, and what you end up with here is you have a paragraph that's entirely on one topic, so it's great with structure. We have two solid evidence sentences, so we're demonstrating content knowledge, and we're following that up immediately with explanations as to how that answers the question. So the evidence is being used effectively to support analysis. So we're checking off a bunch of boxes on the essay rubric. If you guys go through the other paragraphs here, you'll see we follow the same formula. I'm not going to walk through each one here individually line by line, but we're going to have a topic sentence. Not only did industrialized workers suffer from low pay, but agricultural workers also found themselves barely surviving and taken advantage of. This whole paragraph is going to be about agricultural workers. And we're going to have fact, explanation, the same formula pattern again. The next sentence here, or paragraph here, again, this one's going into, we're going to do another supporting body paragraph. In this case, we're going to talk about the wealth gap and the cientificos. Follow the same pattern, and then we pull in our counterpoint. We can't just have it all about economics at the cause. We got to address something else. And so in this case, we're going to pull up, despite all the economic problems that caused the revolution, a lack of real democracy cannot be ignored as a cause also. So we're going to address democracy, but we can't just say that and move on. We have to evaluate why would it be a cause. From the time that Diaz took power by revolt all the way until he had Madero jailed when he became a threat to his power, elections were controlled and rigged to ensure he stayed in office. So we have a few facts in here. Diaz takes power by revolt. He has Madero jailed. He's rigging elections to ensure he stays in office. So this is all a bunch of evidence kind of thrown together into one strong statement, followed up with an explanation. The Mexican people couldn't change the economic system without removing Diaz, and having a free and fair ballot box could have seen him lose an election at some point during his 3-decade reign. So, had there been elections, maybe Diaz is already gone. So this necessitates the need to revolt. Furthermore, Diaz himself altered the Constitution to enable himself to stay in power. After campaigning to have one-term presidents and making it law, he promptly reversed that stance so he could stand for election over and over. So in this case, I've broken this down into two sentences, but again, evidence. Alters the Constitution, how he changes the law back to he can run as many times as he wanted to. Followed up with explanation. Had Diaz stayed true to his original promise, Mexicans would have elected a different leader after only 6 years of Diaz, which could have solved many of the issues facing the average citizen. Sorry, that announcement just got me a little lost here. Okay, so we have our evidence, followed by explanation, and then a final sentence here. A lack of democracy and the inability to elect a leader who would fix the economy was an important cause in the overthrow of Diaz. Concluding paragraph. To summarize, low wages for farmers, miners, and industrial workers created an angry Mexican population seeking change. So we're taking those ideas, putting them back into one sentence. On top of that, they could see that there was, in fact, money in Mexico, but it was controlled by a small elite group of cientificos. As they could not have free elections and remove Diaz democratically, Mexicans had no choice but to join a violent revolt to get the economic changes they sought. So it's basically taking everything in the paper and just putting it back down into, in this case, 3 sentences. No new ideas, no questions, right? It's just summarizing everything that's been written. And so if we look at the rubric, it's going to score very well on that. So let's pull that up here really quickly. Reminder, this is how the rubric is laid out. So approach to the question, Is the question understood? In this case, this would be clear focus with a high level of understanding and implications. Everything is directly focused on the question that has been asked. Structure, very well structured throughout. Topic sentences start each paragraph. Each paragraph is on that. The introduction sets up with a thesis and a preview of what those paragraphs are going to be. So it is there is structure all the way through the entire paper. As far as our knowledge goes, it's going to be relevant and accurate. We also have context put into the introduction as well as in with some of the evidence as well. Examples are appropriate and relevant. Every example we use is directly tied to that topic sentence the paragraph's about, and they're used to effectively support the analysis, right? That's where that sentence after the evidence comes in, because now all of a sudden we're not just throwing evidence in, we're using it to support an argument. Analysis, clear and coherent critical analysis. Again, everything is on topic. The points are substantiated with evidence, and it argues to a consistent conclusion. That concluding paragraph matches what was in the essay the whole way through. And then perspectives. We have evaluation of different perspectives integrated into the answer. If you just put down a sentence or two and don't evaluate it at all, you're not hitting it. If there's some evaluation, but it's not really effective, it might hit in here. If you can give that full paragraph just focusing on that perspective, or even better, integrate it all throughout the paper, that puts you in the range to hit up here. So hopefully that is helpful, whether you needed a refresher or maybe you weren't here when we went over those notes in class. As always, if you have questions, issues, concerns, etc., please just let me know, and I'll gladly sit down and go over any of these things with you.